now, Professor Singh, I want to come to you. We know India attaches great importance to BRICS as well. If you look at how BRICS as an organization started, it had in mind a focus, like Konstantin was mentioning, on economic and trade facilitation. But we are also happy to see it expand to encompass other topics of global importance and global concern. Help us understand how important BRICS has been for India in particular.
I think India that focuses very clearly on ensuring strategic autonomy in India's foreign policy, sees its membership in BRICS as very significant demonstration that India is not only closely working and building partnerships with United States and European countries, but also with China, Russia, and several other countries. Second, what makes BRICS unusually significant for India is the increasing credibility of BRICS. By the last comment I heard from Foreign Minister Suklal of South Africa, 41 countries have shown interest to join BRICS nations, which makes it virtually 85% of global population that could potentially become part of BRICS nations. Third, very quickly, BRICS has been fundamentally an economic grouping, as you mentioned, but it has, because of its rising credibility, also showcased responsibility and interest in several other sectors. Now, for example, more recently, within BRICS nations, India's trade with Russia has shown enormous increase, about $8 to $9 billion, and now in matter of 2 years, $44 billion. China again remains very often the largest trading partner. Sometimes United States becomes largest trading partner. So India's engagement with China and Russia in terms of economic partnership is humongous. I think BRICS definitely, as I said, ensures that India's economic engagement strengthens with BRICS nations. But as I mentioned, that BRICS has also begun to realize, because of its rising credibility and so many countries willing to join BRICS, that it also has to take issues which are not necessarily economic issues. For example, countries like China and India today are seen as voices for the entire global south. So that, in fact, is also important for BRICS nations to use that platform, and for India to use that platform to bring in issues of global south. And of course, as I mentioned, also demonstration of India's strategic autonomy means India must be seen as integral part of BRICS nations. And issues like de-dollarization, issues like expansion of BRICS are areas where India finds itself very critically engaged, because they serve India's own national interests. India doesn't want to be part of a situation of excessive dependence on dollar. India wants to engage several other countries as it expands from becoming now already the fifth largest economy to becoming the third largest economy in 5 or 7 years. So in that sense, BRICS serves as a very important platform for India to pursue its own interests and of course engage with large number of countries which are trying to become friends of BRICS.
What about Professor Vasquez? Process accepting new members. Professor Singh, do you think in light of all these considerations, the summit will result in an agreement to expand?
Let me say a few things. Expansion, other than de-dollarization, is definitely the most important theme for discussion of this BRICS summit. First thing which is most important for any expansion, and we are hearing reports of about 5 new countries likely to be added in this summit. We don't know if that will be true. First important criteria very clearly will be the consensus. So far, BRICS works on consensus basis. All 5 members will have to agree on any new member joining. Now, second important element, if you remember, the origin of BRICS, Jim O'Neill had spoken about emerging economies. So we'll have to look at countries that are seen as emerging economies, not necessarily large economies. Third important element, of course, will be representativeness. Any grouping today must be representative, and that is how Brazil, South Africa were added to make it really global grouping. So in that sense, South-South cooperation, global South will be important elements in determining, and I understand Sherpas have been talking about 2.5 years now as to what will be the criteria, procedure, as to how operationally these members will be allowed to join. Even if decision is made in this summit meeting, it will still take longer time for the procedures to be finally accepted. And final point, I think, which could be flexible, but also whether those new members are willing to also be part and parcel of the new development bank, the currency reserves, and other values that BRICS members hold very dear in that sense. India also is expanding economy. It's going to become from fifth largest to third largest economy in, as I said, a couple of years. So that could again explain as to why India would have also certain amount of enthusiasm, but all nations will have to work together. And consensus is where I think the buck stops. All five nations will have to agree as to how to bring in new members into this grouping. And very quick last point, the world is in any case moving from international organizations of 19th and 20th century, which were multilateral organizations with an organization, a constitution, a secretariat. No more. Now we are moving towards plurilateralism where groupings are flexible, and therefore we could see that five nations put together could also bring in flexibility and innovation in their criteria as to how will the new members be joining groupings. There are possibilities of thinking of observer nations, partner nations, special invitees, friends of BRICS. All kinds of innovations are possible. So I'm very hopeful of something very concrete coming out of BRICS Summit this time in South Africa. What will be the final result? We'll have to just wait for a few more weeks.
Anything to add on this? And where does India stand on a common currency for BRICS?
We see BRICS nations succeeding in reaching out in creating an alternative currency. We definitely know enormous amount of effort is being made in using local currencies. And we are aware that again in last 1.5 years, the kind of expansion of trade in local currencies that has happened, for example, using yuan in Russia-China trade, or using Indian rupee or UAE's dirham for India-Russia trade, and local currencies are increasingly being invoked and being put to use. That itself is a reflection of how increasing number of countries are not really comfortable with the way dollar has been used by Western nations in both putting sanctions and putting certain nations out of the SWIFT system. So India, of course, stands together with BRICS nations in exploring use of increasingly local currencies and potentially launching a BRICS currency as well, not in competition or to undermine dollar, but as an alternative to have one more option for using an international currency. Just like, for example, euro is an international currency, we could have a BRICS nations launching another international currency to give more options to the countries so that they are not held hostage to one currency being dominant. And then we hear this conversation of weaponization of dollar, which has put a lot of countries in discomfort. So definitely we will see some progress happening in that direction.
But I suppose what you said there about options